Hello and welcome, beautiful souls, to the I Care About You podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into life's challenges with compassion, love, and kindness. I'm Juliana J, and today I have a really special episode for you. Today we welcome Molly Booker, author, speaker, transformational guide to the show, who's written a book, The Magic is in the Mess. Now, I want to let you know that there might be a few trigger warnings as we go through this episode, so please be careful with yourself. I want to also remind you about my book, Reasons to Live. It's an interactive guide to help yourself learn more about how you can be kind and nurturing to yourself. There's a lot of talk in here about suicide, but a lot of these practices you can apply to your daily life in learning about who you are, why you're here, finding connection, compassion, self-love, and learning how to communicate with others and help others through dark times. Now, Molly's book is really incredible. It talks a lot about how to find connection, self-worth, compassion, and love. And I want to read a little bit about Molly from her website, where she asks, "Who am I?" She says a few other things, but I want to just touch on this. "Here are some things I have denied about myself that I am learning to accept. I am beautiful, I am bold, I am honest, I am brilliant, I am talented, I am an author, I am worthy, I am enough, I am a lesbian, I am a tomboy, and I am sexy as hell. And here's who I've been along the way. Shy, prickly, irritated, suicidal, depressed, and lonely. I've been a medical office administrator, a life coach, a suicide prevention trainer and advocate, and a United Methodist pastor. These are the things I absolutely love. My family, my wife, my kid, my dogs, my tortoise, bookstores, books, tacos, candy, holidays, handwritten letters, giving gifts, movies at the theater, Legos, stuffies, stickers, and all things office supplies. I love running, outdoors, nature, and there's not a dog I don't immediately fall in love with. Through all of the reinvention, I have learned to use my life for learning, growth, and upliftment. I love deep, raw, and vulnerable conversations. I get excited when we venture into embarrassing, awkward, and uncomfortable. These are the spaces that light me up. I love learning about myself, what makes us do what we do, and how we can be more connected to the world." I also want to read you a quote from Molly. "In the peace is the chaos, the magic in the mess, and belonging comes where you least expect it." Now, at the end of Molly's "Who Am I" bio, she asks, "Now who are you?" And today, Molly will help us dig into that just a little bit more, to know a little bit more about ourselves and where we belong and what belonging actually means to us. So without further ado, I hope you all join me in welcoming Molly Booker to the pod. Welcome, Molly. Welcome, Molly. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I've had this on my calendar all week, and it's one that I'm like, oh, I'm really looking forward to this one. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, great. I am too. I feel like we're sort of kindred spirits in a way, in that so much of what we think and how we work is kind of interwoven in a way.
Yeah, a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Which it seems like those, on a healing journey, there are some of these like big intersections that you tend to hit. So yeah, I think that we've arrived at a lot of the similar learnings and similar pieces in that. So hopefully it'll be helpful to others.
Right, right. I definitely think it will. I was kind of combing over your blogs and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this good stuff, good stuff, good
Mhm.
stuff." And I looked through I was like reading your book, and I was like, "Yes, people, I think everyone's going to really get so much out of this conversation." Do you want to start off talking a little bit about your book, Magic in the Mess, and how that happened and what that was like while you were writing it and what it's about? It would be great.
Yeah,
Nice. I love the cover, by the way.
right?
Yes.
It came out so great. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. Magic in the Mess. It came out mid-January, still pretty new, but it's a great story, and it of course it went in all directions that I did not anticipate it going. So I have really lived my life driving towards success. Like that has been very important to me in my life. And when growing up, I defined success by being married to a man, having family, having car, house, career, college degree, graduate degree, money. Like if I could check those things off, that would mean I'm successful. And it was so important for me to reach success because I thought that is where I will feel I belong. Then I will feel loved, like then life will be great once I get there. And so I am great at efforting. I can knock things out. So, man, there I was just like climbing that ladder, and the more that I seemed to check those things off, the more hopeless I became because it's like, oh gosh, that's one less option towards happiness, and I keep crossing them off and I'm not getting happier. So, what is wrong? And rather than saying like, wow, I think I'm climbing the wrong ladder, it's like, what is wrong with me? And that's really, I took it inward. There must be something wrong with me. And that led to a long suicidal crisis for me. And so, and that was the first book I wrote about. It's called Opting In, and it was really sharing my journey of suicidal ideation, what went into that, if you ever want to. For my mom and my brother, they're like, I cannot understand how you'd ever get to the point of wanting to kill yourself. Like, I just don't get it. And so that was the hope in that book, to shed some light on that, of what goes into suicidal ideation and then what's helpful to come out of that space. And so for the next decade, it was great. I'm out of that space, and I kind of again was like, okay, I've brushed myself off, and I'm gonna climb, a ladder again. And this time I'm thinking like I'm gonna do it through a spiritual lens, though. That it's not just about climbing the ladder, but it's like, what can I learn and how can I grow from this? And so I started doing that in my life, and it's like I had new framework and new language, but I was still using the same operating system. And
Mhm.
so again, I was still kind of getting the same results. So my work looked very different. I was pastor for a Methodist church, and I was getting married for the second time. And I thought, I'd kind of learned from my 20s and early 30s. I've learned about, the things that didn't really work for me. I know myself better. And so this go around, I'm going to get it right. This marriage, I'm going to get it right. This career, I'm going to get it right. And so I was really close. It's like I had this puzzle, and it was like almost done. Like I had career where I felt like I was really making a difference in the world. I had retirement plan. I had house. I'm going to get married for the second time. This one, I'm going to get it right. And yet there was those inner nudges. I don't know what you call them. I call them like a nudge or a niggle. Red flag, whatever that is. There were a bunch of those, and I was so close to like having it all figured out that I really stepped over a lot of those warning signs. And so that's really where the book picks up. Is my life is like so close to being perfect. It's like, if I could just shove this couple pieces of like, if I could just get married, like once I'm married, I'm sure I will iron out this disaster of my relationship. And now that I'm a pastor, I have the job, I'll just figure it out as I go. And it really wasn't getting figured out, it was getting worse. And so that all fell apart. My second marriage fell apart really quickly, almost before it started. So, I'm navigating a second divorce and navigating COVID, and I'd lost two very close friends of mine had cancer during that time, and they ended up passing. So it was just a time where I just felt like it was just mess. Like things were falling apart and breaking down and losing relationships. And this was really baffling to me. Like, this is the thing that I did not want. I did not want chaos, and I didn't want to start all over again. I just wanted it all to look all neat and tidy in this little box with a nice bow, and then it would be great. But it fell apart. It just really, all pieces of it. I left the church. I ended up getting discontinued, which means, I cannot continue with my ordination there. And that was very heart wrenching. And in the midst, I came out, and, so it's like, whoa, I didn't know that ladder I was climbing at all. I didn't know myself. And so that's really what the book is about, is really allowing the mess to really slow down and say, hey, these pieces haven't worked for me. They're not working for me. And let me lean into that rather than just trying to kind of push aside the mess or skip over that part. I actually found like that part, the mess part, was where I found all the things that I had been looking for, not climbing up that ladder, but really in the mess of divorce and failure and quitting and redirecting. I really found connection, belonging, love, family. Last place I thought I'd find it. So yeah, that's the heart of magic in the mess. Whoa,
Wow.
I talked a lot there.
Wow. Yeah. Where to begin? It's such a, wow, there was a lot going on. And I want to acknowledge, I'm so sorry for the loss of your friends during that time. It's such a, ugh, ugh, yeah. And all of it, just all of it, loss of self, loss of direction. One question that comes up for
Yeah.
me is, how did you recognize those gifts inside of the mess and chaos? We can get so just weighed down, and all that negative self-talk is just really on a rampage during that time. And we're finding all these new reasons to hate ourselves and pity ourselves and guilt and shame and all those things. That how did you recognize the beauty that was in there, or the gifts or the lessons? How did you recognize it and not just see it as another thing to, oh, here's another thing I can just beat myself up about?
Right. And I'm really good at beating myself up. I mean, I feel like, man, if I have some degrees, I've got a degree in that with honors. I've spent a lot of time, so that certainly does happen, and I was in the midst of that. I was um, a brand new pastor and struggling as I'm just starting out my career in the midst of COVID, and that was difficult for churches to do anyway, let alone when you're new. And then my marriage was really struggling, and I had just gotten married, and this was my second marriage, and I had a lot of shame about that, particularly being a pastor going through divorce. Like, what does that mean about commitment, and what does that mean about my word? And so that was starting, all that self talk about, man, I am a relationship failure. I just can't seem to make relationships work. And man, this one area of my life, I just can't seem to get traction on that, or I just can't seem to find what I'm looking for. And so, in the midst of that, it was a surrender.
Mm,
Like I had been fighting and fighting and trying to make my marriage work, and we had separated, filed for divorce, and then we, tried again. And that was me trying to put on a good face for the congregation, for the family, for community, for Facebook, for Instagram. It's like, nope, I got it right this second time.
wow.
And but then there was a time of just like, this is not working. We are being horrible to each other. We are constantly tearing each other down, and this is just not. I am not being true to myself in this relationship. I feel like I am losing myself, and I can't continue to do that anymore. So I just got honest with it. Like, this is not working for me. I need to now have a second divorce. And like, okay, that's just that's where I'm at. And it was in the midst of that and being honest and having these conversations that I started having conversations with one of my dear friends. And it turned out, that I ended up falling in love with her.
Wow.
So it was, in the mess of divorce and struggling and all of that, and just being real and honest in the mess of it, that here I finally found that kind of relationship where there's a connection. It always felt like, well, I can connect on this and this cylinder, but I can't like connect all of them, And so finally I felt like I had a relationship there. So it was a lot of that. I think it was getting honest about what was true, like what honestly was working and what wasn't working. And I think the more that I leaned into those things that I had been wanting to avoid or push aside, the more that I leaned into them, the more I began to see like, oh my gosh, I've been looking over there for all these things, and how crazy, how beautiful that the things are actually over here in this mess. Like that was like the shocker to me that I kind of thought like, well, I'll get through the mess and then I'll rebuild my life again, I reinvent myself. But it was actually in the mess that I found myself. It was in the just the messiness of saying, hey, I don't think this is a great fit for me as a pastor, and I need to renegotiate here, or this isn't a good fit for me in this marriage, and I need to look at that. So, yeah, it was kind of like one of my all time favorite songs, U2's I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. And
Mm.
I just was like, that is me. I just, no matter what I read or what job I'm in or where I'm living or who I'm with, it just seems like this isn't quite it. And I'd also been a perfectionist my entire life. So it's like I wanted it all buttoned up and neat. And when I finally was like, okay, hot mess over here, like I don't have it all figured out. Then I started gaining traction on it. So it's kind of like the opposite of what I thought success was, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense to you or if you've experienced that too of like, well, it's in the things that I've been avoiding that I'm really finding what I've always wanted.
It's so true. I mean, I feel like so much of my life has really been just trying to please
Mm.
parents, expectations, communities, people I grew up with, friends I grew up with. I grew up in a very small town that was, everybody knew everybody and all their stuff. And so, how do you make a mistake in that space of, well, just like you were kind of saying in the congregation, how do you make a mistake there, especially if you're the, leader or someone who's in charge or whatever those things are? How do you make a mistake and be human without the backlash of judgment and judgment? Most of the judgment actually turns out to be kind of either your perceived judgment or your own judgment of self. There's a few people that are very judgy, but that's kind of more their thing, not your
Yeah.
thing. You really take it on as like, oh yes, I'm not measuring up right now, and I need that kudos of you're great, you're doing the right thing, you're
Yeah.
amazing. And you're just running towards that all the time because we're so conditioned. And then one day it's like, I don't like that. I don't want that. You start a journey of kind of you have to get out of your comfort zone, right? You have
Yeah.
to say the hard things and
And
yeah.
that is something so spot on with what you're saying about, the willingness or the permission to make a mistake. And I don't know why I feared that so drastically. Like I would do anything not to make a mistake,
Right.
and so and that really was this perfectionism. Like I wanted perfect grades and I wanted people to be proud of me and I, wanted to be the good kid and this has just been a model and it kept me in a pretty narrow lane, in order to continually deliver on that I'm not going to disappoint anybody. I'm going to do what I'm told. I'm not going to question it. But when the, mistakes just started happening, of whether it was a mistake in a relationship or things that just were starting to fall apart. I just couldn't hold all these plates. And what I began to experience is that, like, in the mistakes is where I was finding myself. And, while I was holding this definition of success my whole life of, money and power and, these things, I began to hold a different definition of success and one that really delivered more on what the things that I was really wanting was knowing myself.
Mm.
And I love that definition of success, to thy own self be true. And if that's my definition of success and knowing myself, it changes the whole game. And I can't know myself if I don't ever allow myself to make any mistakes. Like I can only do things that I already know how to do. That's pretty limiting. But when I get out of that space and say, hey, I'm going to make some big mistakes. Let's get messy here. That I really began to discover more parts of myself that either one I had fractured and isolated, like no one's ever going to see this part of me, or I just never had known. For example, I didn't, it's like how we define ourselves and it gets so rigid, like, oh, me, I'm not an artist, I'm not the artsy type, or I'm not an artist, I don't paint, or I'm not a musician, I don't sing, or I don't do music. And so all of a sudden it's like, well, I didn't know that, I didn't even know my sexuality. So, man, like if I don't know that, then what else do I not know about myself? And started trying things that I had never considered before. So I picked up a guitar and started taking guitar lessons, and I was like, man, this is so fun. And started writing some songs and recorded them, and realized, wow, there's this whole avenue that I never would have looked at, because I don't know how to play the guitar. I don't know how to write a song, but just starting it and doing it was really incredibly healing. And I'm finding more and more of those spaces of, wow, this is things that I really love to do. And I got told were wrong at some point or not good or made fun of. And so reclaiming some of those things and, discovering new ones. But I think there is a willingness to be able to change your mind.
Mm.
And I don't know why that was such a it just felt like failure to me to change your mind. Like if I changed my mind in a relationship, that relationship failed. Or, if I switched careers, like I'd failed in that career. And I just see now that my life is so much more what I want it to be when I hold the space of like, well, this is the best that I know today, and tomorrow that could be different.
Yeah, yeah. God, that is just such a powerful message. Is Well, there's so many powerful messages in what you just said, but I'll touch on a few. One, that you can change your definition of self anytime,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere, and to box yourself in. I have this one friend who's like, everything's black and white and it's either good or bad. He's either this or that, and that's it. He's been that this or that since he was 12, and that's it. And there's no space for any kind of growth or any kind of acknowledgement or any kind of self-awareness or understanding. And it's hard to keep relationships and friendships and find connection with folks because the definition is so rigid, and it's the definition of a 12-year-old. It's not the definition per se of this grown man with life that's happened, which would be so rich and incredible if those things were shared. But there's a repertoire of what is talked about and
Yeah,
nothing else.
yeah. I really love what you just said and about this space. And, where is the space to talk about being a human? I
Mm,
think we like to talk about being divine a lot more than we like to talk about being human.
mm,
But where is that space to talk about shame? Like,
right.
wow, I said something, it was incredibly rude. I'm just feeling all the things and I really need to go clean this up. Where are we talking about that? Or where are we talking about the hard parenting things or, wrestling with our bodies or our weight or relationship, or we all show up not our best selves. And where is the space to talk about that, to repair, to learn? To me, it's in the wrestling is like, that's the good part. And I've been so afraid to get in there and to get messy and to wrestle with things. It's like I just want it all figured out. I want to
Right.
know it all. But I'm falling in love more and more with the wrestling of it, whether it's, wrestling with faith or belief or politics. There is a getting in there and wrestling, and does this align for me, or what do I really believe? Let me take another look at this. I know that I've been saying, this is my platform or this is my view, but let me try that on a little different. That is what I'm so excited about and want to create is where is the space where we can wrestle with these things?
Yes, yes. Yes, so many yeses. There's no space for that. Our society has sort of created this don't talk about those things. When you do talk about those things, people will say, you are very uncomfortable how you're
Mm-hmm.
talking right now, and that you're either hit with some toxic positivity, or oh, it'll get better, or the subject's changed, or you're told you're inappropriate, or no one wants to hear that about you, or people start avoiding you because you're having a problem or a crisis, or you're navigating dark times, and people we don't have a skill set for how to communicate about these things because I mean, for me personally, I was raised like, well, you don't do that, you don't do that. That's impolite, and there's only certain nicety conversation that you can have, and you don't ask so and so about this, that, or the other, and you don't have those conversations at all, and especially when you're a child, you grow up and you think there's something wrong with you because you had this thing that maybe was an 8-year-old belief about something. It's not even a truth in the real world, but you misperceived or you interpreted something with your 8-year-old brain that's really bigger than that, and you carried that with you throughout, your life, and you never looked back at it, and but it shaped you and who you are and what you are. Like it could be something very simple, like you're not good at spelling, and you carry that your whole life as like I'm not good enough. And it's that's just so important. Where are those spaces? Have you been able to make any traction on that question?
Well, it's interesting to me that how much I avoided those myself for so long. And and I find when I just go first and say, well, this is what I love and this is what I want to talk about, or I'm just raw and honest about what's happening with me, it's astounding like how engaging that is. And
Mhm.
even with my family, we didn't grow up having talks about our emotions or any of those things. And I see my brother leaning into it more. I've had some really powerful conversations with my dad, particularly
Oh,
after he read the book. Almost didn't make it through, but he did. And then we had some, really relationship changing conversations with each other. So I find that it's not just me, that more people are really wanting that, the realness about it, wanting the deeper conversations and wanting that. And so I find in conversations or spaces like this, and that's why I just want to, lean more and more into that to offer more of those spaces. And I think if we just start doing it, if we just start having more honest conversations, then, that one leads to another, to another, and to another. And I think every time, I have a raw, vulnerable conversation, it unconsciously gives somebody else permission to do the same. And and I really feel like that's where we live into authenticity, that when we're speaking the truth and when we're wrestling with the hard things, we begin to open up the space, or this box. And I think, that like that's certainly how I grew up, of like that's how you make sense of the world, is you classify and you label and you organize things. And so there's all these boxes, like here's what it means to be a good student, and here's a bad student, and here's the good kid, and here's the rebel. And it's like
right,
all
right,
these boxes. And I spent so much energy in my life like trying to fit myself in this box. And every time it didn't quite fit, I brought that in, there's something wrong with me. And
right.
I think so many people do that, that aren't fitting into a box or a particular way, or a way that it should be done, or who they should be, and then think, oh, well, if I'm not fitting, then there's something wrong with me. When it's fascinating that we don't ever slow down to say, maybe it's the box that just doesn't fit. And that's really what I've been seeing in this book, and really what I've discovered for myself was, oh, there was never anything wrong with me to begin with. It was these tight boxes that, my upbringing, that my childhood, that society, that I put myself in, and then they became a prison for me to not even know myself. But when I started opening up this space, now I can have, more of a space to look at my sexuality, to look at my gender expression, to look at the things that I love. And I just didn't have that space growing up. I did not have the space to really look at, is there any other option besides, being with a man in this heterosexual relationship? I didn't see anything else represented. I wasn't having conversations about that. We weren't talking about it. So, I kind of just locked in that mindset and never looked at it. But really, when I went to seminary and started having some of these conversations about, your location, your race, your gender, your ability, your sexuality, and where we fit in the world, and having conversations about it and wrestling with it, I was like, wait a second, I'm kind of seeing myself over here a little bit more. I always thought I was here, but huh. And it was in having those conversations that, I began to see a more honest, fuller expression of myself. And the fascinating thing is I always thought, that the things I wanted were out there. Like the relationships I want to have, like my ideal relationship is out there somewhere. My ideal friends are out there somewhere, like something out there to get. And, what I was experiencing is when I can do the inward work to be the fullest, most authentic version of myself, those things are there. The relationship wasn't something I needed to go find. It was there once I showed up,
Wow.
you know?
That, yeah, that is so powerful because I think, you and I spoke before about this epidemic of loneliness that's everywhere, and people are having these challenging times finding friends and connections and friendships that stay longer than just while they're playing in a baseball league or something like that, and how to cultivate that. And I think so much of what you said is really, and you could speak further to this, but the key is that ability to be vulnerable, to deepen the relationship, to put the time into it, obviously, but it's that vulnerability factor that I think we guard so closely for so long that we never create this, well, we often call it a safe space, and I use that term a lot, but in this context, it's almost like a brave space, like creating this brave space so we can show up as we are and talk about things that are really deeply affecting us and get support from others. And I that's missing a lot of times in our relationships. And maybe you have much more to say about that, but what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
this loneliness factor?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I it takes me a little bit to learn something. Like I feel like I gotta I gotta really get in there and mess it up really good a few times, and then once I really get it. But I think the way that I went about friendship and belonging was backwards.
Mm.
I thought it was about fitting in. You know, if I can do things that other people are doing, then I'll fit in with that group. Or if I can be more like this group, and so it was like masking a lot. Well, I'll try to be more like this person who has friends over there. So if I'm like them, I'll have friends over there. Or I'll try to be more athletic, or I'll try to be smarter, or I'll try to be more good looking, or I'll try to be more cute. And so I spent my life like trying to be what I thought people would want, you know, like trying to be popular or trying to be influential or trying to be a success or an authority on something. And by doing that, it's like friends could not be found. I really struggled in relationships. And, you know, and then I make that to mean something about myself. Well, I can't make a relationship work. That must mean that I am not lovable and ugly, you know, and then
Mhm.
that becomes the truth of me. Or,
Right.
uh, you know, I'm just not finding something that I love to do. There must be something wrong with me. And, you know, really once that definition of success began to change and it focused more on knowing myself, like if the more that I know myself, and what I found is the more that I went inward first, the more that I focused on myself, the more that I wanted to be true to myself. And it's kind of like, well, you know, I'm lonely anyway, so I'm at least gonna like hang out with me. But it really was in that is the more that I allowed myself to be authentic and express, you know, what I really like. And some of it really went against the grain, you know, like I have never liked wearing high heels or dresses or lipstick or makeup or a purse. I have never liked that. And it has always seemed to be this bone of contention. You know, I dated one guy, and our last date was when, you know, we were playing the game of like, oh, if there's one thing you could change about me, what would it be? Like, that is a great idea ever to ask. Not. And he said, I wish you would wear tighter pants. And I was like, okay, and we're done here. Um, so, you know, it was just always feeling like not good enough and not enough by trying to be attractive and cute. And then when it was like, you know what? I'm going to be me. And I got rid of every single pair of shoes that had any kind of heel on it, anything tight, any dress, anything flowery or lacy, gone. And I just started wearing what I really liked. All of a sudden, I was like, one, I felt very different. You know, like, oh, I actually look amazing. I love how I look. And you know, then my energy really changes. You know,
Mm.
I am loving myself. And so all of a sudden, you know, it's I'm connecting with people all the time. And so I think that a lot of us have this thing backwards of trying to get friends, trying to get subscribers, trying to get likes, trying to get things out there. And we manipulate and contort and mask ourselves when we're trying to get something. And when we come from the approach of like, I'm going to be me, the more that we can show up in our own life, then it's like we get to show up. And so the people that would naturally be attracted to us can now connect. It's like now we're online. And so finding community in all different kinds of places. And it doesn't seem like that's a difficult thing to do to go out there and make friends. It's like that's just naturally occurring by going out and being me in the world, doing things that I love to do. And it's fascinating the way that, you know, I do something that I didn't think anybody else would like to do. Like I love Legos. I'm almost 50 years old. I love Legos. And so I have these Legos in my office, and we'll have people come over and they'll be like, "Oh my God, I didn't know anybody else loved Legos. I love Legos so much." So I think it's, somebody told me once, if there's something missing in your life, it's probably you.
Wow.
And if it feels lonely or feels like, man, I'm not connecting, the first place to go is towards self. Well, where have I lost myself? And I think when we're more present and more centered, that's what's really attracting.
Ah, yeah. God, that is so true. And you can show up authentically as who you are. I mean, we all have different personas, right? Of how we show up and where we show up. But if we keep the really the essence of who we are in the forefront of all of that, like when we show up at work, we have to be a little bit more professional and say certain things and wear certain things that are appropriate for the office and all this kinds of, it's a different persona than say if we're going out to dinner with friends or something on a Friday night. It's a different package almost, but to keep the essence of who you are, the core, the who you are in all the other ways consistent throughout these different places that you are where society is expecting you to look a certain way or dress a certain way or and then even deciding, is that even for me? If I have to look a certain
Yeah.
way, dress a certain way, maybe that's not my authentic space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can so resonate with what you were saying about the clothes because I too, same. Every man I dated, oh, well, you have to look like this and wear this, and let me come with you while you're shopping and make sure you get the most uncomfortable stuff known to humankind, and then wear those all the time. And when COVID happened and we were all remote, I was like, wow, this is such a great time to get rid of all those things because you don't need them. And
Yeah.
then I felt like I went through a crisis with, well, what do I even like? I don't even know. What do I wear? And do I just show up in this dirty t-shirt and sweatpants every day? Or what, what do I like? I've always been, whenever I've dressed authentically in the past, someone's always made a comment that was kind of, I perceived as negative, you
Hmm.
know. It's never like, oh, well, oh, that's what you're wearing? Oh, where did you get that? Just all these things I interpreted immediately as,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't right.
Yeah.
I need to show up in some other way or do something else. And I think that's just so powerful for you to say because so many people are just confined in these certain boxes. And
Hmm.
it's not, do any of us fit in the boxes? I don't think so.
I don't think so. And I don't think the boxes are working for anyone,
Right.
including like white, heterosexual, cisgender males.
Right.
It's not working for them either, and
Right.
so I think, what does it look like if we get rid of some of these boxes? And, what does it look like? How am I showing up and how am I relating to somebody else when I'm not jamming them in a box? I have a kid who is non-binary, and we've asked them multiple times, what pronouns would you use? And they're like, they just say their name. Like, can't I just be Leo? Like,
Oh,
and that makes a lot of sense, like, why are you trying to jam me in this box or this box? Like, I don't fit in boxes. And, I think that's one thing I'm really learning as a step parent is like, I have a kid that doesn't fit in any boxes, any of them. And, just how beautiful they are and just this like gravitas that they hold of their own knowing, even when they don't really have words to put a label on it or put it into a box and like, well, I'm not gonna put myself in that box. And I get it makes you profoundly uncomfortable. And it makes a lot of people uncomfortable to to not know, or it's fascinating to me. I think so many people would rather stay stuck and miserable, but it's known and it's predictable, than jump into that not knowing. Well, I'd rather be wrong about myself than not know about myself. But I think it is in that space of like, well, I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what I love to wear. I'm going to play around with it a little bit. I'm going to wrestle with it, or I don't know exactly what my sexuality is. And that feels humiliating and embarrassing, that I wouldn't know that at this point in my life. But I'm not sure, does this mean I'm gay or am I queer or am I lesbian or bisexual? And, like, I'm like, I don't know. I know that I love this person, and that makes me queer for sure. Um, but I think, again, holding that space where we can not know Like I'm not sure. I'm discovering that, or I don't know the fullness of myself, but I'm discovering it every day. And I think, what a beautiful place if we could, more of us can come from that space of like, well, I don't have all the answers and there's a lot I don't know, but I love that starting it out. Help me understand. I think that that could change the world if we just started a lot more with, help me understand rather than, well, I need to jam you in this box and, anything that's not inside that box isn't good.
Right, right. Yes, yes, so much so. It's so true. We don't often say that, help me understand. It's just immediately a judgment call of some kind or
Yeah.
something.
Well, I think too, we're just, in a space where it's so divisive, like like it's this or it's this, and so how can we start to come back together? And I don't think it's about agreement, but I think it's about some flexibility of being able to open up your mind of, well, let me hear what you have to say. Help me understand why that makes sense to you, or help me understand your experience. And that's why I love all these podcasts, because it's an opportunity to hear stories. It's an opportunity to hear a story and say, oh, well, that changes my perspective some. If I put myself in that situation, I could see why that would make sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's so we've kind of lost that storytelling ability. I think a lot, and a lot of it is things like don't talk about yourself or depending upon how we were raised, how we interact with people, what we say or don't say, that we've been scrutinized for any stories that we have had, that we have told others about, that maybe we have been made fun of because our story has become aware, people have become aware of it, not through us telling it, but through whatever grapevine they're associating with or whoever's talking to them or whatever they've overheard. And then that becomes the truth and we don't challenge that and they don't challenge
Yeah.
that. It's, it's just, we don't tell our stories enough and we don't have the skill set to tell them in a way that isn't like, well, let me bring it back to me again. Well, what about me? Well, me, right? The ability to hear the other person's story, deeply
Yeah.
hear it, listen, hear it, and then also be able to tell your own story is is it's kind of a, I don't want to say a talent, but there's a little bit of an art to it that we were just never ever taught.
Yeah. I I also think in a lot of ways social media has made this very difficult. I grew up and we just didn't talk about emotions and we weren't talking about mental illness, or certainly not talking about things like suicide or sexuality. And then it kind of went into this way of how do we connect and how do we communicate? Well, we all now have this like incredibly powerful thing right in our fingertips all the time that we can connect with anyone in the world at any time. But how are we connecting? And, I think by, Facebook and Instagram, and, I'm aging myself right there by just saying those. But the fact that it's like it needs to be edited and it needs to be filtered, and like I just think it creates that message like I need to be edited and I need to be filtered. Like I need to put makeup on if I'm going to go out, if I have acne or something like that, or I want to make sure to polish what I'm saying so it comes out just right, so that people will like it. And to me, that just gets right back into that backward space of doing things to earn and to prove and to please. And really, can we find spaces in with the technology that we have that isn't about like how perfect can I get my picture here, but how can we really connect about things that matter. And and I have a lot of hope. I think that people are doing an incredible job at this. Few in my spaces that have been great are the We Can Do Hard Things podcast. It's
Yes.
an opportunity to like really, they wrestle with it a lot. They get in there. Or Elizabeth Gilbert with her Substack and Letters to Love. Like, oh my gosh, those letters, I mean, I have cried reading so many of them. It's
Yeah.
just really speaking from the heart. And so it's possible. And I don't say like let's throw out all social media, but man, let's really slow down and see how are we using this. Is it bringing greater connection? Have I, met people that have uplift, that are life fulfilling? Or do I just feel like exhausted, worn out, and not good enough when I look at these things?
Yeah. It's so, so true. And it's so automatic. The second you're in line with people somewhere, you rip out your phone because you can't make personal contact with these
Right,
people. You
right,
can't look like you have nothing to do. So you take out
right.
your phone and you start scrolling. It's just so ingrained in what we do. It's almost, it has to be this really, I'm going to turn my phone off now. I'm not going to look at my
Yeah.
phone. It's almost like a challenge that you give to yourself. And
I I've
yeah.
done so many different coaching groups and things like that. And, one that I think has helped me so much is there's like different ways you can do it, but challenges or games or experiments or things like to get out of your comfort zone. And we had a game that I played with a group, and I forget the name of it, but it's like you would come up with like a dare, and then you'd be come up like with a number 1 through 10, and so you'd both come up with a number, and you could pick the range. If it's you say like, oh, I want my range to be one to two, most likely you're going to come up with the same number, and if you come up with the same number, you have to do the challenge. So if
Uh,
it's like, oh, I'm just going to go wave at that person, I'm happy to do that. I'll pick like 1 to 2, and then we both yell it out at the same time. One, oh, it's a one, I did it. And then the things that are a little harder, like I'm going to go randomly give that guy a hug over there, like I'll pick 1 to 10. But we played that a lot. And I would make myself pick a smaller range, and super uncomfortable moments of like buying somebody coffee or just going up and striking up a conversation with somebody. Or one time it was go give that guy a hug over there.
oh,
And,
wow.
it's like, like, and all this stuff, like, oh, I don't want to like invade his space, and that's gonna, like all that story. And it took me a minute, and I went up and gave him a hug, and it turned out to this amazing conversation. Not that everybody would react that way, but that
Right.
one was great. But I think those things that we can do to practice getting a little bit uncomfortable, and it can be turning your shower on to cold for a few seconds. That's a great one. It's super uncomfortable, but the thing is the more that we practice doing those uncomfortable things, it just gets easier to do the other uncomfortable things. So I have a cold plunge. I now love getting in the cold water. One, it makes me feel amazing, but it's also like since I've started doing that, I find other things aren't nearly as hard to do. It's like I'm training my body that uncomfortable isn't really all that uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And if you take the time to get out of your comfort zone in these small ways,
Yeah.
it becomes easier and easier. Even if it's something like I always use the example of like order something totally different when you go to get your daily coffee. And even if you're, because so many of us won't order off the menu because well, I don't know what that is, or I don't know
Yeah.
exactly how to say macchiato, or whatever,
Yeah.
we just don't ever get it because of that fear right there of not saying it properly or not knowing what it is or having to
Yeah.
ask a question as to what it is. And to do those little things daily, it just
Yeah.
becomes so much easier to do the bigger things when the time comes. It's almost like you start challenging yourself in a way.
Yeah. And so I find I've had so many experiences where it went really well. Like it
Mhm.
actually led to a really fun conversation or a memorable connection. And so to me, that's fun. I'm also very introverted and have a lot of social anxiety. So it's both. I don't love going to parties, but when I'm out in the world, I love talking to people. And it's just whatever is like, oh my gosh, those shoes are amazing.
Right.
Or I travel quite a bit, and in the airport, I'll stop and talk to the pilot and just be like, hey, that was an unbelievably smooth landing. You crushed that. I just say more of those things out loud. And most of the time, there's this great conversation. And I walk away like, that was fun. Um, every so often, it's a little awkward. But that's like the worst that happens. I was in the airport the other day and saw this woman who had the most amazing pants. It was like a comic book pants or something. And
Mhm.
so I walk up to her and I was like, hey, I just want to let you know that your pants are amazing. And she was like, thanks. And kind of walked away. Like, hey, does it happen where that was a little awkward? Yeah, but I don't know what was going on with her. I still did love her pants. But 90% of the time, it's really fun. So I find I do it more and more and more. And it's, I think that is what gives us more of a sense of feeling connected and a sense of belonging of, hey, maybe I didn't pre-know anybody from when I traveled to Nashville to New York City, but I had these great conversations along the way, and it made me feel seen and heard, and I was able to see and hear somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that question of belonging and how to create that for yourself. I like how you're kind of creating it in these little, you're not putting all this pressure that belonging means I'm in this lifelong group of people and this is my belonging. You're connecting and belonging in these moments of the day
Yeah,
as you're going on. That's so fantastic. And I think more rounded to just I'm connected to these travelers I'm traveling with. I'm
yeah,
connected to these people on the plane, in the waiting room, wherever it is. And
yeah.
then also that connection in the bigger sense, which is a question I had for you in the moments when you were saying you're in this mess and chaos and you came to meet your now wife. How did you know that this person would receive what I had to say? Because I think so many of us will go, they're not going to receive it well, so I just won't.
Hmm.
We miss that
Yeah.
connection.
Well, the quick, easy answer is you'll have to ask my wife. Which that that will be a great conversation. She's writing kind of her version of Magic in the Mess, and what it was like because we both came out at the same time
Oh,
and both
wow.
had been in marriages to men, and so is interesting to see from her perspective. So stay tuned, that will be a great conversation. But
Yeah.
she did first, so I just was clueless. Here's my friend Kelly, we've been friends for a long time, and then we started talking more and hanging out, and I enjoyed her connection, but there was no context or anything to think about it in that way. And I flew to Nashville to visit her and then left, and then she came right back to Colorado, and I was like, wow, that's interesting that she's coming to visit. I mean, I just left there. And so we hung out, and at the end of that weekend we were driving back to the airport, and again, it was just saying something honest.
Mhm.
I was in the cell phone lot, almost to the airport, and I just said, I just feel so devastated to drop you off. I don't
Mm.
even know what that means. And I just started crying, and I was like, I just feel like the best thing I've got going, I'm about ready to drop off at the airport, which is weird because I really do love my life. And she said, oh, I think I know. I think I know. This is what happened to me when you left the airport in Nashville 2 weeks ago.
Mm.
She said, I haven't been the same since. I think that you're my person. And I was
Wow.
like, oh, like BFFs? Like Grey's Anatomy? Christina and Meredith? And she's like, not quite like that. And I was like, oh, you mean like lovers? And she was like, yes. And I was like, huh, okay. And I'm not kidding. It took that long of like, huh, okay. I could see it. And it, to me, it happened so effortlessly and so beautifully and so naturally without all the labels of like, like, hey, I really feel like you're my person. And I was like, let me try that on. Yeah. I have been feeling that too, and I haven't, had words to really put that in, but I see that. And then it was putting all the language to it that felt a lot harder and messier. Like, oh gosh, does this mean I'm gay now? Am I queer? Do I need to come out? And all of that kind of stuff was really painful, but just the real human connection. This is so beautiful. It's such a great love story. It's a great love story. I think somebody needs to make this a movie because I think it would be really fun.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. That's so, yeah, how beautiful and organic, just kind of,
Very organic. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think would be possible if we weren't so rigid in who we need to love or how we need to love and what that looks like or how we need to show up being attractive or beautiful. I think me trying to appease the male gaze, of trying to be beautiful or sexy for a male, Like it never would have it work for me to be attractive to Kelly because she doesn't find that stuff attractive on me at all. And it's
Right?
like, Kelly, no, that's so weird. It's like as weird as it feels for me to put it on. Don't wear that. Like, no. But when you wear your, jeans down low on your hips, that's super sexy. I'm like, oh my gosh. You find that sexy? Because that's something that I've always loved, but thought I had to kind of compromise about myself. So, yeah.
Right. I feel like
It's,
we could do a whole podcast on
yeah.
just that.
It's so fascinating to, with whoever it is, but to have somebody in your life that really can love you for who you are, that is a feeling that I had never experienced before because I had never been really authentically me. When I would wear something sexy or tight, and then I got one Halloween, I'm like, I'm going to be a sexy Ewok because the whole neighborhood was doing Star Wars. And so I lost a ton of weight. I put on this sexy outfit, and I got a lot of comments like, Molly, you're super hot. Well, it made me feel like the opposite because I'm so uncomfortable wearing this, but I'm getting so much positive affirmation. It's like, yeah, people don't really like what I love only when I mask and do it your way. But when I can wear what I want to wear and then have somebody delight in that, it's like, oh my God, now you're really loving me. This is
Yeah.
incredible. This is where the magic is.
Right, right. I love that so much because I can just so resonate with that and Halloween costumes and that whole like, oh, I need to be this and do
Yeah.
that. And the whole time it's like you
And
can't even
that's the crazy thing. If we never take the mask off, we'll never know who would be attracted to us ever.
right. We're always attracting the wrong kind of relationship for us or the because we're not
Yes.
authentically ourselves. And
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. Oh God, that's so yes, yes, and yes. I so resonate with that. It's
And then you look back and it's like I'm going to be 50 this year and I just kind of laugh and chuckle at myself of like, "Oh, wow, I had this all so backwards for so long and I wonder what else I'm still have that's so backwards, and it's kind of fun to put some light to it and just be like, it's funny, like
yeah, yeah. I
it's
mean, you're
messy, it's funny, it's awkward, and wow,
yeah,
can we certainly get ourselves wrong sometimes.
a lot. I think, sometimes I think all of this journey of life is just about that because even when we figure, even if I had myself all figured out right here in this moment, 3 days from now, there would be new things.
Yeah.
It never ends. Just when you think, oh, I figured it out now, and I'm over this, or I've let this go, or what, then something else presents itself where you're, oh, maybe I haven't done any work. It's
I
just.
know. Oh my gosh. Same. Yeah.
Yeah, I always try to tell people like it's not this, we're so conditioned to perfection. I know we've talked a lot about that in this hour, and there's so much to unpack there with that model, but we think like, okay, life's like this. It's just this upward projection. You hit these marks, these goals, da 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 da, but it's really like this, and it's we don't know that. We're so unprepared, and then we're trying to mask it and hide it, and yeah,
Yeah.
wear clothing we're not genuinely ourselves in, and so many times I've just felt like I've never enjoyed a moment because the whole time I've been thinking about, I can't wait to go home and change. I don't know, I don't know how to have
Super
conversation.
uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly.
Shoes hurt.
Yes, and I have to walk over there and that's so hard. And how am I going to do that? And I just forget it. I'll just stay
I
here.
know.
It's so funny how things,
I know.
yeah, stop you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's an easy comfort zone thing for all of us to do. Well, maybe not so easy because I just remember thinking, I don't even know what it is, but trying on different things to just, experiment out in that
Yeah.
clothing or whatever it is you're wearing during the day, kind of something small
Yeah.
and see if it works. Yeah. Wow. I love that so much. It's just, I just love it so much because I think that so many people struggle with that. And no one ever talks about it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting with going out, and I do not love being out late. I never have. I am such an early bird. And I don't like really big crowds either. Like, it's really hard for me to track more than one conversation at a time. It's like really exhausting. I can
Mhm.
do it, but I can't do it for very long. And I think, one, I just forced it, or I drank to compensate, like, well, if I'm drinking, it makes this a lot easier. But I think leaning more into the things that I love, like I love doing things in the morning. So going to a coffee shop and having a coffee with one other person is so more authentic and fulfilling to me than going out to a bar. It's like I don't drink anymore and it's loud and I am so uncomfortable. So, one, I don't think it's always about, like I can really love getting in my PJs and hanging out at home. I'm a pretty big homebody. But I also find that, there is times to go out and connect, doing it in a way that feels aligned. Like I love bookstores so much. So going to bookstores and going to a bookstore event or going to a Lego fest, it's like, oh my gosh, I am meeting, like, here's my people.
Mhm.
When I give myself permission to do the things that I love to do in a way that I love to do it, it is fun to go out and connect. And even with, a lot of social anxiety or being introverted or however we want to say that, I can go out and enjoy and connect with people and find things that align, but in a way that, really aligns with who I am and what I can and cannot do.
Yeah, I think that's so important to realize where your interests lie and then to kind of pursue that with maybe others who are also in the same space or enjoying the same
Huh.
thing. Do you have any tips for people and how to say step into that space where they start the conversation?
I think it can start with, who's one person that you would love to have coffee with? Somebody that you've been missing or want to connect with, and if they're in your town, great, invite them to go have coffee or whatever would be fun, tea, or go have a Coke or meet at a park, like whatever it is you love to do. Invite somebody to go do that. And if it get on a Zoom with somebody. Like, hey, I haven't connected with you in a while. I'd love to see your face and let's have a chat. Pick up the phone and call somebody. I think it can certainly start there, but I think it's about, like, take yourself out on a date. Like do something that lights you up, that seems super fun, and see who you bump into doing that thing that you love. I tried glass blowing and my wife wasn't able to go, so I went and did glass blowing by myself and I loved the person who was working there. Oh my gosh, I'm like, I would love to be amazing friends with her. I didn't like really put the energy in to follow up and invest, but that could have been a great friendship. And that was just doing something that felt fun to me. I love going into a coffee shop and just having a mini conversation with the person who's waiting on you or who's ordering your coffee. And a lot of times it's a short conversation, but it is a conversation. And I just think it's like a muscle. Start with just saying hi to somebody, or just naming the thing. Like
Yeah.
look over at somebody who catches your eye and be like, kind of weird. We're all staring at our screens in here, a little lonely. Like just calling it what it is and, seeing what happens there. Take an Uber. Uber drivers are so fun to talk to. Oh my goodness. I've had, like, I could write a whole book on Uber conversation. I don't think you really have to go looking. I think that there are, just look in your email. Pick somebody who's in your inbox and just reply a heartfelt message back, you know, or who texted you today, or follow that nudge of who have you been thinking about, or what have you been thinking about, or, like, hey, I've just had this inkling to go to a movie. Well, go to a movie. I go to movies by myself all the time. See who's sitting next to you. Say hi. I've never heard anybody at the end of the day say, oh my gosh, I connected with way too many people today. I had so many good conversations. That was just too much. Or, oh God, I just loved people way too much today. Like, ugh, a lot less of that tomorrow. Right?
Yes, it's so true. It's so true. And I think that this is all really great advice, especially for folks that are working remotely or hybrid or a little or maybe doing some sort of work that is more solitary, like writing, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we think that, oh, we'll make these connections at work. We'll casually walk by somebody and be like, hey, how's it going today? Or, how's your dog or whatever. And when we don't have that kind of forced interaction of passing each other in the hallway, we have to make a little bit of an effort.
Yeah.
Passing each other in the hallway, that takes effort to then make eye contact and say something. And stepping out of your comfort zone, as we've been talking about, to just say a little something. People are never, how dare you say, hey,
Yeah,
thinking of you today. Hope your day's going well. Or no one's like, how dare you? You
right.
know?
And here's a great place to start. One thing I love to do is I talk to dogs all the time.
Yeah.
It's just a great way to practice. Like I'll be driving in the car by myself and I'll be like, "Oh, hey, buddy, I love your sweater. You're doing a great job. Walking your human over there." And then now I just do it whenever I see dogs. Like, "Oh, look at you! You got your raincoat on." I have a weird dog voice. It's different for every dog, but it
Right.
just develops that muscle. And now my kid talks to dogs too, and it's fun, like go talk to the trees. It's like with CPR, you practice on a dummy first. You like get some muscle memory. It's a little awkward, might be a
Right.
little uncomfortable, but practice with little kids or dogs or trees, and then, take a little risk and say hi to somebody and see how that goes. You never know.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I often, when I'm driving places, will kind of role play little conversations. And even if they're just, I don't know, really silly, like, oh, what am I going to say if I'm in line with somebody that was talking about something, or what am I going to say? And then I'll actually role play it just spontaneously. I never thought to myself, oh, I'm going to role play this thing. But, like job interviews or interacting with people, or you want to go to a hard conversation with your mom, or ask for a raise, or you want to have a hard conversation with your friend, or you want to bring something up, or you want to go into these more brave spaces and deeper conversations to just, I role play with myself all the time without even thinking that's automatically doing that. Just to think,
Yeah,
what will I say? What do I look
yeah,
like? And when you're just spontaneously, like I also talk to the dogs all the time, my own
I
dog,
love it.
other people's dogs. Yes. I mean, to the point where I'm like, my neighbors must think I'm so weird because here I am living, I'm here by myself, but yet I'm having all these
Yeah,
conversations.
I do. And it's great. I love it. It's super fun.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I feel, and it's so true. You're building that muscle of conversation and being able to come up with things spontaneously, which I think is another thing people have challenges with. Like, oh, you see your neighbor, but you don't know what to say or how to strike up a
Yeah,
conversation. And to just start doing that, even if it's just to yourself, you'll be
yeah.
surprised at what you say to yourself and your dogs.
It's amazing what comes out.
Yeah.
That's more of in the flow or kind of being with the spirit, just
Yeah.
going with it.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, and I want to thank you so much for this really wonderful conversation. There's so many takeaways. It's just really, I'm just so, so grateful for you for coming on the show and being here and being so open and vulnerable and with your story and sharing all the facets of your life. That always gives us all the permission sometimes that we need to show up like that for ourselves. So I really appreciate all of that.
Gratitude on this side as well. Thank you for holding the space for these kind of conversations and, thanks for the platform to be able to do it. I love it. It helps me. I learned today too. So thank you. I love the conversation and, curious to see who will connect, like somebody once told me you haven't yet met everyone in the world who's going to love you. And
Ah,
who knows, even from this conversation, what
right.
connections may occur to meet people that, that will love us that we haven't even met yet.
Yeah, yeah, so true, so true. Gosh, that's great, great last minute advice. I was going to ask you, got anything final to say? And
That's it. That's
that
my
is
full
wonderful. Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
my pleasure.
Thank you all for joining us today. What a great conversation. I want to remind you to check out Molly's website. Please share this episode with someone you think might need it or benefit from it. And I hope you will all leave some comments as to what are your challenges with making connection and finding friends. What would you like us to cover on the podcast? You can also message me on my website, which is linked in the description. So thank you all so much for being here. Know that I love you and I support you, and you've got this. I'll see you next time. Take care.